All right, so yesterday was a whirlwind of welcome to Active Record, and that was quite a bit. How are y'all feeling? Like wizards and not wizards at the same time, I'm sure. So what I want to do is kind of step back today and just take some time to be like, okay, what the hell just happened, right? And talk through a few of those things that you either just like learned on the ground as you were trying to get stuff working, and maybe a little bit more of like, oh, that's why that is there. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And then as you've realized, we're going to continue working on the two other challenges that you might not have accessed yesterday, but should be done by the end of today, okay? Which is around validations and associations, okay? Friday, we'll be going through an assessment. It's a little less like ridiculous intensive as last week's, but that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. Question?
Will it be active record and SQL like here?
From what I can recall, I think it's solely SQL based, but I think there might be active record. I'll double check it before you get it tomorrow, obviously.
Okay,
but off the top of my head, it's like not as heavy as last week's. I think it's pretty straight up like SQL stuff. So the good thing about, the bad thing about that is that like yesterday we were like, you're not going to touch SQL anymore. And then tomorrow you're going to touch SQL. Yeah, but that's just to confirm what you know in terms of what you need to say in order to get the stuff you need. And you're not going to need to necessarily do too much inside of P-School. You're just going to need to be writing queries from what I can recall, okay? So it won't be as scary as it sounds immediately. So I'm going to refer to this file when I go through today's presentation, just so that we can have clarity. You might have other things in the other two repositories that I'm not going to like immediately go over, but they should have pretty similar file structure, and it's going to be something you continue to see as we grow into the stacks of work that you're going to work on and building on with Sinatra and Rails. Okay. So you want to build a thing. A presentation by Carrell, and a checklist for starting up an active record Ruby program. It's really hard to say. It's easy to read, hard to say. Okay. So what we're going to cover, what I'm just going to cover with you this morning is what are the things that you really need to start, you know, like when you download your repo, like what are the things you just need to be aware of and make sure that you're ready to do before you jump into the program, okay? The second thing we're going to do is do just a little review of where to find your stuff, right? Because we just went from having maybe 1 to 3 files in a folder to having like, what, like 18 to 20 files and multiple folders and multiple extra things, right? There's a lot of junk that you might or might not have looked at. So it might have been overwhelming or just like, I'm not going to touch anything except for what I think I should touch. Okay. And then we're going to go through like a step-by-step review of what it takes to get Active Record up and running. And it'll be a really good way for you to practice like, okay, these are the steps I should be taking whenever I need to get started on my project, or at least double check that that stuff doesn't already exist. Okay. The last thing we're going to go over are strategies for when you mess up, right? And then, spoiler alert, you will mess up and it will be okay. So don't freak out. Okay. So before you start, it's small reading, but read the README. Okay. Some of it might feel either overwhelming and or confusing, but just like do a once over of what the README is actually telling you. And then scope into like, okay, what is the one thing I need to do first? Because going through the entire README and reading through all the releases and trying to like solve the problem through its entirety, similar to what the Hash Rocket team was saying, that can be, you can get way ahead of what you need to do and start you on the wrong foot. So just in general practice, always read the README. And also give us feedback if you're like, none of this made any sense. Maybe you can have somewhat more clarity on like what this word meant or that kind of thing. We can always improve on our READMEs. Review what's been made for you already. So some people tripped up yesterday on like trying to figure out what they can do based on what was already created and what wasn't. So that will be clarified a little bit in what we talk about what stuff is where, so you know where to find the things and whether they've been made or not. And then from there, what you can make to help you solve any of the problems that you're trying to get through, both with these challenges and in general, right? Like what libraries am I using? What are they providing to me, etc. The third one, get your terminal ready. So like make sure you're in the right folder. Make sure that you have like all the stuff set up. Yesterday I realized that I upgraded my OS and I again did not remember to set up Xcode, which happens sometimes. Or I didn't upgrade. I didn't like do an upgrade on my homebrew. So I was using an older version of a certain gem that I needed. So that kind of stuff is stuff that you want to keep up. So at some point you'll want to get used to doing like a brew update, brew upgrade, making sure that you're using the right Ruby version and that all your stuff's on point before you get into stuff and get errors and then wonder why you have these errors. Okay. The next one, and I'll talk a little more about this, but you're gonna always, whenever you jump into a repository, the first thing you should do is bundle install. Okay, and that's similar fashion, you're gonna end up doing that when you get into node projects. You're gonna do npm install just to get your environment set up, right? If you sit at a new table, you wanna make sure you bring your pens and whatever, your paper and all that, right? The same thing is happening with bundle install. Question yet?
Is there like a list of instructions for just like getting a terminal ready? Like every time you start something, you should check this.
There isn't really a checklist. It's something that's been really annoying to me. I'm personally gonna wanting to build one, but right now, just like having bundle install, I mean, knowing that you have bundler, that when you get into a directory, you do bundle install. You're doing brew update or brew upgrade periodically. Like for y'all, maybe you just do it at least weekly, if not daily. Brew upgrade and then brew update. Or you can do brew doctor. Yeah, so homebrew, remember when we downloaded homebrew at the beginning? Homebrew is the thing that like keeps all of your stuff like nicely stored, right? Or like I'm the one that's gonna make sure all your stuff's on point, right? But if you never talk to them, it's just like not doing anything.
Which stuff?
Your stuff meaning like the programs, like we did brew install git, for example. Brew is the one that, you know how I always tell you like it's on your computer but you don't need to know where? It's because brew is the one, homebrew is the one that's keeping the libraries in your computer the way it needs to be and storing them.
So Git, SQL.
Yeah, all that stuff. So homebrew knows where those are and whether they're updated. So you need to like periodically check in with homebrew and be like, hey, are things good? How are we doing? Are you up to date? Are my things up to date? Yes, no, update them please, thank you, and goodbye, right? Periodic conversations like you can do that anywhere because it's not referring to any particular directory. It's talking to a larger system directory with your user.
And that was brew update and brew upgrade.
Yeah.
Does bundle install globally?
Bundle install, good question. So bundle, we'll get into, besides committing, before I get into the next slide, I'll talk about that. Last thing, commit early, commit often, y'all. Commit all your junk. Whenever you, commit, immediate, okay? Because the next moment is gonna be like, I broke it. And then you will never be able to go back to the woohoo moment because you never committed, okay? So just for all of our sakes, commit early, commit often, all the time. Now, what is all this stuff? So referring to, these are the players that have been introduced to our lives that we did not have to deal with previously. Okay, bundler, rake, and active record. Okay, these are the new people that are our homies that we're working with in our repositories. Okay, or just in general, right? Bundler, we installed a long time ago, but we never really utilized. Okay, bundler is the one that is going to help you go to the store and get the gems that you need in order to work on the repository you're working on. So it is usually directory specific. So when you do a bundle install on a gem, it's going to bundle the gems that you need for this particular repository. So
can you refresh my mind on what a gem is?
Good question. A gem is a library of code that somebody else has written that makes your life easier.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, so gem install active record, for example. Gem install, does anybody think of another gem? Faker. I'll talk about that in a minute,
Yeah,
right? So a gem is a
it's like
library.
applications almost.
Yeah, so, but instead of, so this is kind of like you got promoted. We all got promoted to middle management, okay? So now we got these 3 homies that are gonna help us do our work. So we don't have to do all the work ourselves, right? So we have Bundler, who's like, look, I know you need gems to do your work. I know you're a busy person. I'll go to the store and get the gems for you. You don't have to go now, okay? So you just tell Bundler to go get the gems you need. So the list that you want to give Bundler to get the gems you need is called the gem file. So that's on this side. You'll see that in your repository.
Oh, okay. It's like from what I know of getting gems, we go to whatever website it is and like we search for one, like, oh, I want this gem.
Yeah, so right now you probably remember talking a little bit about Ruby Gems. If you go to Ruby Gems site, community gem host, right? And you go and you look for the one and you download it, right? But if I'm working on a repository that already requires certain things, like I don't need you to go pick the best thing that should work for my program. I already made a program and I have a particular ingredient list of gems that you need to use in order to use my program, right?
So listed in the program.
Yeah, so if you look at, here we
Is
are.
it automatically going to go to this like rubygems.org to pull the gem? Or
Yes.
it just depends on the website?
So if you look at the active record queries folder that we downloaded yesterday, right? So one thing you'll see here, and now you'll see in many folders, is a gem file, okay? It says get the gems from rubygems.org as the source. And then it says, here are the list of gems that I want in order to do the job in this repository, okay? So you just list out the gems you need. It's just like writing a shopping list, and then Bundler's like, I'm on it, I'm gonna go get them.
Then don't we have to like research every single one of these, like contact with their rate?
Good question. You can, right? But eventually you'll get to a point where you already know what those things are and you don't have to run to the library to get all that information.
And then as soon as you download this, like on your terminal, right? Isn't that in your system somewhere? Or do you have to download it every time?
So, good question. When you download a gem, when it goes and fetches things, so right here, I ran this before, but I'll do it again. Bundle, seriously, bundle.
And where are you right now?
Okay, good question. PWD, where am I?
Okay, so you're in active. Okay.
Okay, so I'm in the repository. I can also see that here, right? And then I just made myself an extra branch so that I can push that stuff up later.
Okay.
Cool? So I know I'm here. The first thing I want to do is bundle install. Once I run bundle install, Bundler's going to be like, okay, let me go look for the gem file. And then it's going to say, okay, let me get those things for you, okay? If you see something called using, that means that it already exists, okay? Bundler knows where it is, so it just said, all right, I'm going to use this. So it's like I went to the pantry. I got the stuff because you already have it.
And it's going to check for the latest updated one.
And it says here, I'm using Rake, and I'm using this version of Rake. Okay,
which is the latest.
That is usually the latest. Okay, so one thing you'll notice here, I have no numbers, right? So gem file right now just says, get me the latest of everything, right? Get me the newest eggs, the newest whatever, okay? Here, after I bundle install, I also have a gem file lock. This says specifically, when you did this, when you created this program, these were the things that were used at this version. Okay, the important part here is then if in the future you have a newer version that isn't supported by this program, you can have a differentiation like, I actually need you to use this older version, so can you go get me the older version of that gem? Or can you make sure that this gets updated? So later you'll figure out how like dealing with versioning of different gems works. But for now, just know that if you see a gem file with no numbers on it, you're telling bundler, go get me the latest junk, okay? And I'll be good to go, okay? Question?
Well, instead of you use bundler, like when you're doing terminal and you just put like gym like one at a time.
Everything I'm telling you now, you could do yourself. But again, you got promoted. Why are you doing it yourself? Bundler is here to help you out, okay? Also, it will get annoying eventually because you don't know exactly what everything needs. So say Bundler went to go get Rake, right? So if you see here, Bundler went to go get Rake, and Rake was like, look, if you're going to get me, you need to get my homie concurrent Ruby because we work together. So Rake's like, fine, you can come too. I mean, Bundler's like, fine, you can come too, right? Who else do you need? Oh, we also need mini test, and we need builder, and eRuby, and Crass, and Aural, right? Like, I didn't ask for those guys specifically, right? But all those folks are necessary for this gem file to work. So you're getting all of those pieces in addition to the actual gems that you referred to. Those are called dependencies, right? When you look npm install and you do an npm install, you'll see this huge node tree that says like, I got you this, but I also needed these in order for this to work. So Rake knows all that stuff. Bundler knows all that stuff. It'll do that work for you. So let Bundler do their job. So it goes down the list. It says, I'm using this, you're using this, you're using this. And then if there are any things that it had to go get, it'll be green and it'll say, fetching this from Ruby Gems, installing this from Ruby Gems. You'll see that in green. If you ever get into any errors, you'll see it'll hopefully explain to you in best words that it can, or the library that's having a problem. It'll tell you, hey, I had a problem with this one. It needed extra stuff, or it was having beef with this other guy. So you need to figure that out before I can install all these things. Okay, and then the last thing it'll say, hey, I got your bundle. These are the gems. These are the gems that are installed. If you want to get more information, you can do this. Bundler is your friend, okay? If you don't do this and you try and run stuff, it's going to be like, I don't know what that means. I don't know who you're trying to talk to, but that person's not here, or that gem is not here, right? Okay, so bundler install, that's how you work that.
But they're all installed in that global gem folder.
Bundler is taking all the information from either your computer where it is globally installed, or from Ruby Gems and making it accessible to your repository. Okay?
You said it updates them as well?
It will update them if you tell them to. So if you do bundle help, it tells you all the information about like what Bundler can do.
So it doesn't stand, if you already have it, it's not going to update it.
It's not going to automatically update anything because you didn't tell them to do it. It's just, they're all just waiting for you to tell them what to do, everything. So it's not just automatically going to do it for you. Okay. Next person that's new to our crew, Rake. So I've been talking about Rake a little bit. Rake is a little more advanced than Bundler in that Rake is more specific to your program and it can do tasks that you want it to do. Okay. Rake is now kind of like your sidekick that's going to talk directly to the database. It's going to give you access to things. Okay. And you can also give it more tasks to do for you that you can configure in the future when you learn how to configure Rake. Okay. But for now, there are certain tasks that you have available to you that Rake will help you do. Okay. So no more, in this case, needing to go into Postgres and like play with the database directly. Okay. Rake will help you, set up a meeting and deal with all that with the knowledge that they have. Okay. So you can find Rake by looking at the Rake file. Okay. This is all the configuration. You don't need to know how to build this. Okay. Just know it exists and that Rake is being configured to work with your repository to let you do things. Okay. So for example, you see one here, IRB console. Remember I asked a few of you to do Rake console. This is where it's getting that information. And literally Rake knows that when you ask for the console, it's going to do this work in the terminal and open up that setup. Okay. So outside of looking at all this stuff about like what you can and can't do, you can ask Rake directly like, hey, what can you help me do? So you can say Rake-T. Say, hey, Rake, what are the tasks you can do? Rake will respond with the list of tasks that it can do. So if you say, hey, grab me the console, it'll set up the IRB console specific to the repository you're working in, okay? You can also talk directly to the database through DB console, and it'll open up a Postgres console communication, okay, specific to the repository. And again, you did these before. You did Rake DB create, Rake DB drop. So you're not doing create DB directly in the terminal. You're telling Rake. So now you're not doing the work directly. You're saying, hey, Rake, can you go do this for me? Yes, I can go do that for you. I'll give you log about like how it went and help you out if you're trying to do the wrong thing. Okay, so create, drop, set an environment, migrate, rollback. So seed, those are the ones that you're usually going to use. Okay, that's Rake for you.
So it's just a better, it has better tools than Active Record for doing the stuff like seeding and.
No, Active Record is the next one I'm going to talk about. Rake is going to utilize Active Record. Excuse me. Rake is going to utilize Active Record to do some of their work too. But think of Rake like your sidekick assistant. That's like, I got you. You don't need to remember all the steps to create a database. Like I got it all down for you. So just tell me what you need. I will get it for you. In terms of getting, talking to the database or setting up a communication with the database, all that stuff. I will work it out. Active Record is the language that you would utilize to build the stuff that you need for the database to work the way you want it for this particular project. Okay, so again, it's object relational mapping. So everything I think I want in terms of my objects, Active Record is going to be like, cool, thanks for this menu and recipe. I'm going to map it onto your database. And I'm just going to be like, okay, if you said this, then on your table, it should be this. If you want that, it should be in your table like that. Okay, it just abstracts the direct relation, the direct communication you have with the database. It also keeps you from doing dumb things. Okay, so yay for Active Record for those kinds of things. Okay, so related to the rest of this, I want to just go quickly over what folders you now have in the repositories you're going to be seeing. Where is my, here you are.
So you could write all the Rake in Active Record, but it just makes, you could,
Rake and Active Record are separate.
But you could substitute, you don't need Rake. It's just one of those things that mean another simplification of Active Record. But you don't need
an assistant. You can do it all yourself, but it's there for configuration purposes. Okay. So the further and further we get into the way that Ruby larger programs are built, the more abstracted you're going to see some of the stuff that needs to be done a certain way in order to work well. And it's going to be abstracted into other gems that just do it well, that you don't have to configure in a specific way. It's just best that it's done a particular way. Okay, so don't necessarily think of like Rake doing Active Record's job necessarily. Just think of Rake as an extra helper that's doing a lot of work that you would have previously had to do and probably messed up, that could have potentially messed up your whole program, that now you don't have to think about as hard. Okay, so folders. This is a GitHub folder. You don't have to think about this, but it's going to be in every one of your, you've seen it already in your repositories. It works for GitHub. It's not a part of your local repository, like specific to Ruby, okay? So outside of that, you have an app folder now. So app is the folder where you're going to see a lot of other folders that have to do with your models. Right now, you're just going to see a model folder. And your model folder is going to show you, this is every Active Record class that I'm working with. So technically, like product CRUD should probably be inside this folder with the models. But I don't know why it's not. Okay, so models folder is where you're going to find your Active Record models. Okay, maybe that's why it's not in there, because it's not an Active Record model. Okay, that's why product is inside Active Record, inside of models. Okay, config, you're going to see a bunch of stuff that you don't need to look at, really. So just know that all the larger like configuration that's happening for this larger program to work is going to be usually inside the config folder, and you're not usually going to have to touch it. So don't really get into that. But if you want to know, like, this is where, this is the kind of work that Active Record and Ruby and Rake, they're doing for you, and this is where that configuration is being written, some of that configuration. Okay, so like all that stuff, you don't need to do any of this stuff. Okay, question?
Who's creating all these files and folders?
So sometimes it's generated, and that's usually like Rails is the framework that you're going to end up using. So the larger framework, it knows like every time I know I need to have these things connected. So some of that's going to be auto-generated. Some of that in previous work that we've done in building this, we've configured ourselves for you all to utilize as like a precursor to when you use Rails. Okay, so that's kind of where that's coming from. Okay, so just gloss over the config file, know it's there, don't touch it for now. Okay, DB is a folder you will touch. Okay, in it you'll usually find the following things: a migrate folder. The migrate folder is where you would put migrations. So anything you want to add to the database from Active Record is a migration. So you're migrating that knowledge into the database. You're translating what Active Record, like what you want to have done into the database, and it's done by a migration. Okay, so when you wanted to create a table, you would utilize migrations to do that. You would write that out, build it out, and then you would migrate that file. When you do Rake DB migrate, it says, okay, I know what migrate is. I'm going to go to the migrate folder, find a file, check the timestamp, because each of these are timestamped, and then do this task of creating products.
Can you go back to your slide real quick? Okay. DB folder.
Yeah. So I'm just telling you, like, that's what's in migrate. Okay? And then you also have a schema. You don't have to worry about this file. Don't touch it. Just, it's a generated thing. It also says that here. This file is auto-generated from the current state of the database. So don't touch it. What you will touch is the seeds folder, or seeds file. Okay? This is where you actually create all the things that you want to use as like little seeds, like fake information, so that you can play with what the database should do. So when you did this product thing, we created all this information from this line of code. It found the seed product model, and it ran all this information to create the product items in the product model. Make sense a little bit?
No.
Okay. How can I help clarify seeds for you?
Is there any way we can?
Okay. So this is the data that you're putting into the fake information you're putting into the data, right?
Yes.
So seed product.seed.
Oh, this particular information is going to be different for every repository.
Yeah, but so where is this pulling it? So it's requiring.
That's why I was showing it.
/send seed product.
Yeah.
Is that something online?
It's something right here. See, require,
Okay.
app,
Yeah.
seed product.
Okay.
And then it was using
Doing
this
it 30
model.
times.
Yeah, I was using
Okay,
this
and
object to do that.
Model is something that you created.
This is something we created specifically. Yeah, seed product. But the seed file in general, so regardless of what's here, okay, so if I do that here, okay, when you create a project, right, you're going to have all this. I'm going to go through this later, but this is where you would put your seeds. Okay, this is where you put the stuff that will generate the records in your table.
Fake records.
Fake records. Seeds are for fake record information. It's not for real stuff. It's for fake.
And this is just for like testing your program?
Yeah, because basically if you don't have a bunch of data and you call like, you know, product.all, you're just going to get an empty record that's not really useful to figure out, like, how do I get the last of something? How do I find out a query of the most important thing, right? So you can't test that stuff out if you don't have like a bunch of records to play with.
Can you go back to the C product RB?
Okay, it's gonna take a minute. So like for now, we can go into like how to build. We'll go into how to build one later. So we'll go into that later because this is extra and unnecessary for right now. Okay. So I just went through DB folder. What?
Is there any way
question?
like, we can see like the table?
You'll see all that stuff in a minute. I want to just go through what exists in these folders before you get into like why. Okay, so just what is it? We talked about DB folder. It has a seeds file. It has a migration folder, and that's where your migrations happen, or that's where the files exist. And then you have a spec folder. That's where your R spec lives. So when y'all were running Rake spec or R spec do this stuff, that file was inside this spec folder. Okay, that's where your R spec will live.
What is it, a directory that your database is stored in?
Your databases are not stored in a file in your repository. Instead, you have a schema that reflects what the database looks like in terms of its table structure. And then you have the seeds, and you have a way for the configuration of your database, like the things should be, how you can connect that database. But you're not physically storing the database in this repository as like a file.
It's like somewhere in this P-School directory that has your...
It's in a system directory in your computer that this repository knows how to get to make those communications simplified. But you're not going to see a file here that says like database.
You never have a local database.
You have a local database, but you're not, in any of those circumstances, are you going to see a file inside your repository like that is the database reflected exactly. Okay. Okay, so the last thing was spec folder. We went through that. Okay, now let's get to steps. Okay. Here is the process that's really useful for you to go through to make a thing work. Okay.
What thing? What's the thing?
A thing is whatever you want to build. Is it a veterinary website? Is it a products repository? Is it a
But in this case,
bookstore
repository for these
for-
apps that you're talking
Yeah,
about.
so whatever thing you want to build, you have to get through these steps in order to get to like the real fun of like playing with all that stuff and, you know, making $1 billion or changing the world, whatever you want to do. All these steps are necessary to do that, right? In terms of a Ruby program dealing with the active record, okay? So the first thing you do, schema, draw a schema out, okay? That's, to me, the most fun. That's when you actually sit down and talk about stuff. It is a very important step. Don't skip this step. Don't touch your computer, okay? The first step really should be you drawing it out, talking it out. What is this really, how does this really work? You know? The example that I like to use is like a vet, like Paws Chicago, for example, or like any kind of like a pet shelter, like animal shelter, right? So what does an animal shelter have? And then you start drawing it out, just like we did with hotels and whatnot, right? A pet shelter has pets. They have potential adoptees or people that come into the store, right? And then that store connects a pet to a person, and that makes an adoption, right? So now I know I have at least 3 tables that explain a pet, a person, an adoption. What does a pet have? It might have a name, a type of animal, right? A breed, an age, blah, blah, blah. Person might have like a name, an address, phone number, whatever, okay? And then adoption, how do I make that adoption known? On this day, this pet got joined with this person for this much money and whatever, okay? So you're spending time thinking about the naming of things. You're spending time thinking about the data types that might be necessary. When I ask for a date, I should probably use a date. Or when I ask for a name, I'm probably going to use a string. Is it like a huge string or a small string? Like, consider all of those things that you need to know about before you even touch any code, okay? Yeah, spend time thinking about the associations. Should any of these fields be required or not? I should know that before I make any choices that could affect either like people using it or the data that I'm going to be putting into it, okay? Step one, that's step one. Step two, make and run migrations. So the next step you do is going to be directly dealing with the database, okay? At the database level, first of all, you should make sure a database exists, and that's why we asked y'all to do Rake DB drop, Rake DB create, okay? And drop is really just a mechanism to make sure that you don't already have a database that exists that could affect how you try and do this, right? So Rake DB create will actually create the Postgres database in your computer, okay? It'll associate it with a particular name relative to this repository, and it'll make sure that it knows how to talk to it. If Rake needs to go and talk to the database again, it knows where to find it. Okay.
Is this the same database that we're like creating? There was some like 30 times that do seed stuff. Isn't that like,
So the seed stuff is going to end up in the database that Rake already created. Before we do any of that stuff, we have already run these two lines of code in the terminal, Rake DB create.
so database isn't the structure, not the information that fills it.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're making boxes, right? And then the seed is throwing the stuff in the box. Question.
What do you mean by per table? Is one database is supposed to have many tables inside?
A database has many tables, right? So if we just talked about right now that pet shelter, right? When I did that pet shelter, and I was like, oh, this has many pets, right? So immediately I made a box named pets, okay? And then I said, this also has like people. And then those two things, if I join them together, make adoptions, right? So this was me drawing my schema out. That was step one, right? So I know I'm gonna be working with three tables, a pets table, a people or a person's table, and an adoptions table, okay? So from there, I know I'm going to make like name, and obviously at the top, it's already gonna have ID, right? ID on all of those. So I know that's the first attribute for each of my tables. From there, I say I need a name for my pet and a name for my person. And adoptions has a date. That might be like where I end, okay? So now I know I'm going to end up creating 3 migrations. One for my pets table that will create me a new pets table. One for people that will create me a new people table. And then one for adoptions that will create the adoptions table.
When I hear the word migration, I think moving data, but there's no, you're not moving data. It seems like you haven't created the data.
Good point. So yeah, so those of us who have worked in things that are not tech first, right? Like think of a migration as like a movement of
People,
stuff
right?
or people. Yeah, like the Great Migration or something, right? A table migration is going to say like, can you move your database information around, like the data structure of my database? I'm making new sense of what my schema is. So it's more like just moving the schema around in your your database. Okay, so a migration just means like when you first thought of this column, now you should think of it as this other column. It's just a name for what the database is going, like how the database changes. Whether that is changed by adding a table, changed by adding a row, or changed by adding a column, right? Or changed by adding any name information, any of that stuff. So it's more about the structure of your database, not about the records themselves.
So what does it mean to create one migration per table?
So you create one migration file that is going to hold a create table, like a method called create table that's going to tell Rake that when I create when you go create the database, create it in this format. So if
Are we
we
gonna be able to see it?
the types and the names.
exactly. So when we looked at the
Are we gonna be able to see an example?
yeah, here's an example right here.
Okay, yeah, that's what.
Okay, so when we created the database,
The database is create products.
no, the database is, it's something called active record queries something something. I can't remember the name of it. Okay, database as a whole has its own name. This migration is allowing that database to have a table on it called products. Okay, so I'm going to create a products table. So create table products, named products. Okay, where's that thing where you can like, I don't know where it is. Anyway, okay, so create table named products. Okay, and then here are the columns that will be on that table. So we know when we dealt with this yesterday, we had a products table that had manufacturer on it. It was a string. It was not able to be null. Okay, same thing. We have a model column, can't be null. We have a category column, can't be null. Those were all strings. You have a description that was a text field. So the data type was text, which would probably create it as like a huge text blob or something.
So we just need to be able to accept that migration means we're creating a table.
So it can mean many things. For now, just know that when I need to make a change to the database, that in terms of the structure of the database, I will be doing that by creating a migration. For now, you'll know that as just, the main migration will be a table, creating a table in the database.
So
Okay.
same command. Rake DB create.
No, so it wouldn't be Rake DB create. It would be Rake DB migrate. Okay, and that's why I had that listed here.
Yeah,
There's no
let's
show
say
on the slide.
No, see, once DB is ready, which you use this for to do that. So once you've done Rake DB create, once that step is done, then you create one migration file per table that you expect to have in your database.
So we do create in a name before we make the file for the migration.
You don't do a name. So remember when previously you were doing create DB name? Okay, remember in your terminal you did create DB name for creating a Postgres table. For creating a Postgres database, right? When I did create DB schools earlier this week, right? That was creating a database in Postgres called schools. Okay, you're going to tell Rake to do that for you by saying Rake DB create. And then Rake knows what it needs to do to create a database for you respective to this particular repository you're working on.
But you still have to, let's say you don't have database now. Let's say you're empty, right? You don't have anything. And you can use our Rake DB create school.
No,
No,
you don't give it an argument. Just say Rake DB create.
And
Because
Just names of the folder name.
there's configuration that Rake knows that will give it a folder, it will give it a database name that you don't need to worry about. That's why again, it's an abstraction. You are not going to name the database because it doesn't matter what the database name is. You're not going to be calling it by its name. You're going to tell Rake to bring it when you need it.
how are we gonna call the database name? How are we gonna? We don't call that.
You don't even talk directly to the database as a whole. You talk to the data
Just call it
through Active Record.
database DB.
Yeah.
Doesn't care.
You're saying, hey, Rake, I don't care. You probably have 100 databases you're dealing with. Like, I don't care how you name them. Just when I call you from this folder, you bring me the right database.
So gave it a name.
It gave it a name.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter where it is.
It doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter what it's named. You focus on now because you're in middle management. You don't care how many databases that person has to deal with. All you care about is that when I'm in this folder, I know what database. I just want to say, bring me the database relative to this folder. And Rake is like, I got it. I'm going to check what the name is for this folder. I'm going to check where that database is. I'm going to bring it to you. Done.
So every migration has one folder. Is that
Every migration has one file.
one file?
So right now we only had one table. When we worked on this previous SQL queries, right? How many things did we deal with? We only dealt with product, right? So that table was the only one we were working on. Eventually, in this case, right, I'm working with 3 tables, okay? So I can create 3 files. It's best practice to do 1 file or 1 migration per table, okay? Because that way you can roll back, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But for now, just know that I'm going to create a migration that's going to tell Rake when migrate happens. When I say migrate, it knows it needs to go to this folder, the migrate folder, look at all the migration files that I created, and do the work based on what I wrote out for that each table to be described and created with.
But what if, I know we're not supposed to do with database directly, but what if we go back to Postgres and do we want to see let's say we want to deal with the Postgres directly, like
You don't want to.
Yeah, but I mean,
You don't want
we
to.
don't know, how we can know the database name?
You will know, you don't need to know the name, you just need to know it will exist. You need to know that it migrated that information. Rake will tell you all that. So like any desire you have to like get all up into Postgres, that's like you micromanaging a junior person. That you gave them the task to do the work. You don't need to watch them write all those tasks down and do all that work, right?
Yeah.
You're promoted. You don't need to do all that minuscule work. So like that's where you need to like, ooh, you know, like I gave them the responsibility of doing this, so they're gonna do it, okay? And then when I need something, I can just call these things out and then it'll get brought to me, okay? So you do RakeDB create to make your database, then you create files that show this is exactly how I want my tables to be structured. Then you run the migration by, ooh, you're right, that should not say create. You were like, why I wasn't saying that? I'm sorry. No. That was me just not writing it right. But so yeah, thank you for noticing that. I will change that. So here it will say RakeDB, I can't change it, migrate. Okay? RakeDB migrate. Yeah. So not create. Ooh, sorry about that part. I was like, wait, we're not here. Now we're here. RakeDB migrate. Okay? So it's DB:migrate. Okay? When you do that, you'll see the log of Rake having gone out and said, it'll say like very clearly, you know, table created, columns created, whatnot. So it's giving you the information you need. You're just not doing it yourself anymore. Okay? And then don't forget IDs and foreign keys stuff. When you're creating a migration, like notice here, it's not written in here. So even that, Rake knows. I know you didn't write ID, but I know you're gonna want an ID. So it will make one for you, okay? But just know that you wanna make sure that you're keeping in mind, if I didn't write add index or add foreign key, it won't do that. It won't do that work. But it will automatically create an ID for every table. Anytime there's a table, it's automatically going to be like, okay, you need an ID for every unique serialized ID. That will be the primary key of that table.
The ID that they made,
Index is different. Add index is different.
What about this one? Which one is key?
Exactly.
Which one is it?
It's not there.
Oh, it's not there.
No, because it knows that when you want to create a table, it is automatically knowing that you need an ID as a primary key serialized from 1. So it will create that for you. Again, I don't got to do that work. See, by default, I already know an ID exists on my tables. So unless otherwise specified, it knows I will make an ID for you.
How do you know which one that is a key ID that we want?
It knows that unless you otherwise specify it, you always put an ID on your table that's a primary key serialized, right? So instead of me as a person writing this every single time, the convention of this knows that it will create a default ID. If I don't, or if I say like, oh, I want, like if we have an SKU, for example, that's like very specifically like a unique identifier that I want to make as my primary key, then I would specify that here. And then it knows, oh, I don't need to make an ID because it's saying this is the primary key. But if I don't set one, it will set one for me.
So you say like when they
So
do
you
like
can
join,
still say if you want to.
right?
You can, yeah, you can configure it extra if you want to. But again, convention over configuration. The convention is that every table has an ID field that is a serialized number that is the primary key. Just about every table you see will have that convention. So why make you do it? It knows that it needs to be done. So it will do it for you.
So if I want to do a foreign key, let's say if I have another table here, I can do like.
You would add foreign key where, or you would write that information. So if we had,
That's an example, I guess.
yeah, so give me another table that might be related to a product.
Customer.
Yeah, let's say if I want
Oh,
to.
no.
That would be the other way around.
So what if we ended up having a manufacturer as like a table instead of here,
Okay. Yeah.
right? Besides, like, ignore that this exists right here as the name, manufacturer name, okay? And then we wanted to do, like, we would do T dot references, manufacturer ID, okay?
What's reference?
It's saying that create a foreign key relationship with saving manufacturer ID as a foreign key. Or instead of doing this, outside of that, let's not look at that because that's extra explanation for you. An easy way to see it is out here. You would say add foreign key, and then it would be products, manufacturer. It would look like something like this. And I'm not recalling the syntax specifically, but you would have a line in your migration that says add a foreign key from this table to another table so that would be met in the database. And then on the database level, that add foreign key that you wrote in SQL, that line would be created. Like Rake would be like, all right, I'm going to write all the SQL out for this, and then I'm going to tell it to the database will do it, and then I'll make sure you know that it was done.
And can they have more than one foreign key in the table? Like foreign keys is only one in the table, or they can be more? Like if you have three tables and the middle table, they're linked.
Oh, you can have multiple foreign keys, yeah, for a join table, for example, right? So then you would have add foreign key this, and then you would have another add foreign key that joins this key to that table to that other table.
But you can only have one primary key.
One primary key, multiple foreign keys, dependent on the.
And primary key is going to be assigned by them, right?
The primary key will be assigned if you don't explicitly assign it here. It will be assigned a table. So like.
What would boards create a foreign key? Why would you do that? It already assigns them.
No, it doesn't assign a foreign key. It assigns a primary key.
Primary key, which is basically taking the place. It's assigning a key. So
It's assigning a primary key.
It's like
So what's the problem? Why would
ID.
Actually, what is a foreign key then?
Good question. Let's break that down. Okay, so primary key is what? It's the first thing that assigns whenever you have a record, the first thing you see is the number, right? So like this was my first record, this was my second record, this is my third record, right? That is the way that this table is going to hold a way to uniquely identify each record in your table, right? That is being set as the primary way to find this one record. Okay, so whenever I need to ask for, because you don't know exactly what's going to be in your database, maybe one day we start like speaking in emoji and we go from using not any English anymore and we use emojis now, right? So we're not going to say like, hey, give me the record for John, right? We're going to say, give me the record for like Happy Face. Okay. So the only way I can refer to that same record of John and Happy Face would be by its number, the ID of 1, because it was the first record in my table. Okay. So no matter what happens to the actual content in your database, the primary key is always going to be unique, and it's always going to refer to the same information that it was initialized with. Okay, so that's why primary keys are important. Additionally, if you ever in another table wanted to refer to the relationship that this table has to the other table, you have to do it by a uniquely identifying piece of information, and that would be by the primary key on the one table. It would be set as a foreign key on the other table.
Okay, so let's take one example, like 2 people own 1 pet.
Yes.
So you would have people ID, pets. So you have people table with pets ID on one person's table, and that same pet ID on another person's table.
Yes.
And
on another person's record, right? So it's about records, not the table itself. So when you're referring to on the people table as a whole,
they're like line of whatever they're row.
Yeah, so on their row, there's always a place for you to ask which, like,
yeah,
what pet, like.
So do I take, okay, so pet has a unique ID of 1. And
yeah.
Or like 16, whatever it is.
That has a primary key of 1, yeah.
Or, yeah. When it goes on the people's ID, or
Yeah.
the people's record,
You
does
would
it
have
stay
something,
at 1, or is it a
it
different number?
stays 1, but it's called something different. So here, it's called ID.
Yeah.
But on a foreign key side, it would be called like pet ID.
But it's the same unique identifier.
It would be the same number you would refer to, like
And on the second person's.
So it would look like that. Yeah, and then when you refer to pet ID 1 and pet ID 1, you know that on the pet table, there's a record that's number 1 that is this that the people are referring to on the other table.
So it's just foreign to people. That's what that means.
Yeah.
Foreign key, but it relates to the pet. A certain
Yeah.
And pet ID 1 is the foreign key.
On this table, yes.
Okay.
And then so you're referring to like on the pet table, there's an ID, right? So you'll know a foreign key by this kind of structure. It'll say like table _ ID. You'll know that that's a foreign key referring to another table. Okay.
I want to add one more thing, like you say like the primary key is going to be assigned by, because it's like the ID like 1, 2, 3. But is there any situation that we have to have a specific primary key at the table? What kind of situation that we're gonna assign primary key to?
Again, if you want to use UIUDs or you want a specific, like a different identifier than just a general number, then, but again, and that is extra configuration that most people don't do. That's why the default is always to utilize primary key being like a number serialized generated thing. It's not often something that changes.
Do they have the maximum of like, because like I know some.
There's a maximum. I think that Jack I think said last when they were here, right? There was some like range of like 2 billion that you can utilize. So it's not like you're gonna get to a place where you.
What extent they have limit?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. So like if you are Facebook or if you are Amazon, right, you might be thinking like, oh, I can't really use this primary ID anymore. Maybe I'll use like something more like with like a 32-bit set of information because I'm that legit with my stuff, right? So, but you won't at this point get to that point. So don't worry about it, right? Again, convention over configuration. It's like, don't sweat the small stuff kind of thing, okay? So we're at step 2, migration. That's where migration comes into play. That's the second thing you're gonna do. The third thing you're gonna do is set up your active record models, okay? Your active record models are going to live in the model, in the app folder, in the models folder. So it's app folder, model folder, then all your models. Okay, just like we saw here on the left. We have app folder, models folder. Okay, and then we have product. Okay, your model should always be a class, and then it should always inherit from active record base. Know that when you inherit from active record, you're getting a lot of stuff. So you're not really going to put, at the beginning, you're going to get a lot of stuff without having put anything in this class. Okay. But that's where you build it. And each file is having one model in it. The other convention you should know is that, remember, we have singular model, single class, plural table, right? So we had a products table and a product class. Okay, and then products is underscored like snake case, lowercase. Product is capitalized and capital case. So if I had something that was like, that had two words in it, right? Both of those words would need to be capitalized the same way you would set up your table here. One thing I would note is that your file is lowercase, so product.rb is singular, and then snake case if it's multiple names, right? Product underscore crud underscore and lowercase. And then in here, it's product crud capital case
Well,
for a class.
It's a big concept for like to have S as a table or like just a class without it. But I mean, if that it's gonna impact any like coding at all, or it's gonna extend.
It will start impacting your stuff if you don't use this convention. So get used to that. Get used to that kind of.
Are you saying that we create these files?
Yes, you will create a file for each of your models. So right now with my animal shelter, right? I will create 3 files, one for my pet model, one for my person model, one for my adoption model.
And you mean model, when you say model, you mean table?
Yes and no, yes. So these tables were migrations, right?
Yeah.
But now I want to create an active record model to map to my tables, right? That's where active record comes into. That's the joy of active record, right? For every table I work with, I want to have a corresponding model or a class as we've known it, right? I want to have a corresponding class that is inheriting and the like super abilities of active record model. Okay, so we call those models. So for every table in my database, I will have created a class in a file called models, and each one of those classes are themselves active record models. One model each per table.
So,
Model.
I guess I want to make sure we get the naming convention correct. So,
Yeah.
like, let's say if I have pets, which is plural,
Mm-hmm.
I can do pet.rb to put my model stuff in. And
Exactly.
for class, like, what would I do?
Class pet.
This class pet. So class. So I can have 2 pet files.
No,
Maybe
you would
pet
have
and pet.
one pet file, pet.rb.
So I have pet.rb for my model, and then instead of I have to make a 2-word one for like class.
No.
Or
No, you never make, your models are always going to be singular. Just like whenever you deal with a class,
Okay.
it's going to be,
confused. So it's like we have product and product crud. So like we have 2 files for one table.
no, you have 2 files, one table. Product crud in this example, when we were doing this, product crud was a plain old Ruby object. It was a Ruby object that was talking to products. Products was the only table that existed in the database.
Oh, so I'll still only have one of those classes, and I can have multiple.
So that
models.
actually is a good reason why product is in the models folder and product CRUD is outside the models folder. Products CRUD is not a model. Products CRUD is a class, a Ruby class object that I created or that we all updated, right? So that we can emulate what happens when we utilize active record with a particular model.
So I can talk to different tables through product CRUD if I have one.
Yeah, but again, product CRUD is the thing we made up, right? In my case, when I make my animal shelter, right? When I make my animal shelter, there will not be a product CRUD anything that exists. Is that?
Take a 5-minute break.
Yeah. Let's take a 5-minute break. Okay, for the purposes of this, I'm gonna make an animal shelter project.
Yeah. That's
Okay,
a
yeah,
great
let's
idea.
make one.
As a whole. We'll make an animal project, animal shelter project, and we'll start from this, from one through this process. How does that feel?
Yes.
Okay,
I
cool.
was gonna make the same suggestion.
Okay, cool. Ah. Well, mine is a no-kill shelter, so deal with it.
I have a son. Why do I need an animal?
Hey,
I'm gonna start with
I don't have a son. That's why I have an animal.
I wouldn't have an animal irrespective of having.
Okay.
I'm just more of like a lazier guy. I don't like additional responsibility.
It's valid. Okay. Let me see. How do I want to do this? Let's pause this stuff. So we're back. I forgot to press record, and we are focused on pet shelter, which is going to get us through the steps that we need to take in order to get Fluffy adopted. Oh, and know how to build a thing, right? And the thing we're building right now is a virtual pet shelter. So just to, follow through all the way with this, right? We talked about our schema. We talked about the things that we want on these tables. What do you think these data types should be? Name sounds like a string to me. String. Species sounds like a string to me. Age looks like an integer to me. Owner, string. Email, string. Okay, owner ID. Integer. Okay, pet ID, integer. Date, date. Cost. Good question. Would it be a float? If it's money, could it be a...
No, what do we want to do? We did it like...
We did all sense.
No, we did integer. These are cents.
Cents, okay? In the future, you will see this as that being the wrong answer if you say float, okay? One day you'll see that floats are really bad for money. I'll send you a presentation why float is horrible. You either use whole numbers or you use other things called big decimals. Otherwise, don't touch a float with money. So let's say we're going to use strings because I just don't even want to deal with.
Yesterday was a float. I'm not sure.
Yesterday was an integer.
Yeah.
It was an integer.
What's a float again?
A float is 247, right? An integer is a 9. If I say I want 2.4 to be an integer, it'll turn into a 2. What happened to the 43 cents? I just lost 43 cents. Boo! I hate you. You made this an integer. You erased my 43 cents times a billion people. It's a lot of money.
You just want to make it an integer.
All the time.
Yeah.
So that's the point. The point is integers, like, keep whole number. Keep it wholeness. Okay? But talk about money stuff later. Just the point is, we decided we're making this an integer for right now. Whole round numbers are the best for right now. Okay? Now, let's go through the last thing. Should any of these be required? Name. Yeah. I don't want to blank. Well, no. This is a very nice shelter, and every pet has a name.
number one.
No, we should be in this. Okay, so required species required. I don't have like an non-recognized species. So that has to be
Latest.
required. Age, nah, I don't know when I get a dog what their age is, so I'm just gonna say that can be optional. Owners, required. Email, not required. Adoption, owner ID, required. Pet ID, required. Date, required. Cost, not required. What if I give somebody doggy for free? Maybe I just do it one day. Just say integer, not required.
Nobody would take this out.
Yeah. Or I can set a default. That's a good point. So if I said by default it's 0, otherwise I set it, I can set a default. Okay? So we talked it out, right? In our thing, we're here. We go through present. Right? We used whatever tools we wanted. We considered the naming of our stuff. We considered the data types. We considered the associations, right? We have a join table that joins the pets with the owners, and that is the way those are going to be associated. What type of association quiz, pop quiz, what is that? What type of association would that be on the pet, for example? So a pet has an adoption, or a pet, does a pet have an owner specifically? Only through adoptions, right? We'll see that when we get to associations. Y'all can settle or simmer in it. Consider required fields. We did all those things, right? Sweet, we just completed step 1. Now we're in migrate. So I have this new terminal window with a new folder directory that we're working in. And I have a thing that doesn't want to work with me. So what are the steps that we're going to do to make sure that we're ready to start the next step? Once I get this, we're going to bundle install. That is the step number 1.
So we don't need to do create table, drop table, create table.
Afterwards.
Okay, so we're going to bundle install. That's step number 1. Cool, I have all the stuff I can use. Great, thank you. Now, the next step we're going to do is what? Rake. Let's do first Rake DB drop, just to make sure. All right, cool.
In what case, like, would there already be a database?
If one day you forgot you created a pet shelter a long time ago and you wanted to try it again, and you didn't know you had a pet shelter database that already existed that you didn't want to work with, for example. Okay, so otherwise, Rake DB create. Okay, so Rake's like, all right, I'll go talk to Postgres, create a database, done and done.
Because we're in the pet shelter, like file name folder, whatever. That's
So
what you want to call it.
I physically changed this, but there's configuration that will do that for you. Okay. All right, so now we did drop, we did create. Now what step are we at? Migrations. Okay, so we look over here at our stuff and we see we need to go to the database folder and the migrate folder. Right now we have no migrations. So if I ran migrate right now, what do you think would happen? Nothing. It went to try and do a thing. It didn't find anything to do. It came back. That's it. Okay. But now we want to create a migration. So in this folder, we're going to create a new file. We're going to save it as we're going to use a timestamp. So it's like 2017. What's today? Think about like a whole timestamp. Oh no. 1005 1100 whatever. I think that's it. That's fine. I don't remember anything after that. So that's 2017, October 5th at 11 a.m. Right? And then it'll be called create pets. Okay, .rb. Okay. So we're going to create a migration. And I don't remember all the steps, so I am just going to look at this one and copy and paste, because there is no shame in copying and pasting. Okay, so we're going to erase all this junk because we're not doing any of that. And then we're not going to do any of this right now because we don't need it right now. Okay, so instead of create products, we're going to create pets. Okay, now this is a method called change, which means change something in the database, right? Create table. What are we naming our table? Pets, right? Do. Okay, so inside of this, create table pets do this to the table, right? T is like, this is the table. So we're going to, everything that we want, every record, or no, every column that we want in our table, we're going to notify the database of, right? So in our README, I'm gonna kill Robocop for real. Robocop is hating on my life. Okay, in our README, we have pets have a name. So we have t.string name, right? And then we wanted that to be a required field, right? So then we have null, false, right? So we got that one done. Next, same thing. We can just copy that down. Instead of it being name, we're naming it species. Null, false. And then the last one we have is t.integer. Oops, not I. T.integer. Age. And then nothing because we're cool with that being null. Okay. And then again, this one here, t.timestamps. It's another method that Active Record gives us that will create two fields in our database. What two fields do you think will be created? I'll just tell you, created at and updated at. So there'll be two columns in your database now that have this record was created at this timestamp, and then whenever you update it, it'll say this record was updated last at this timestamp. Okay, so there's two extra special things that Active Record gives you. And note, we didn't write ID in here, right? So that will also be generated by Active Record for us. Okay, are there any foreign keys that I need to put on pets right now? No, right? Because we're not doing any extra things. Okay?
Is there an Active Records feature that labels it with the who modified it?
Who modified it?
Yeah.
No, but you can make it if you wanted to. Okay, so we made the create pets. Okay, so we're going to basically do that same thing. So copy, what is it, app on, oh no, not db migrate. Is it called pets? Oh, I moved to the other one. Sorry. Let me get back into it. CD pet shelter. Okay, we're gonna copy db migrate the 2017 whatever, to another DB migrate. (2017) 1005 1101, or just 1106 right now. Create owners. Did it create it for us? It did. Okay, so now we have owners here. Close the pet one. Now we have owners. So instead of pets, we want it to be called owners. Create table owners. Okay, now what is in our owners table? So we have names, so we can still keep that. And then we have one called email, right? Null, we just remove null. Yeah, I think you could set null true, but you don't really want to, you just leave it off, right? So default is that a null object can exist. Okay, and we're not doing age, we just have timestamps. Done and done. How are we feeling? Yeah, so now we're going to do it again, except we're going to create adoptions, and then it is now 1107. That makes sense to y'all? Okay, so now let's go to the next one. So now we're creating adoptions, right?
So what is the 5.0 mean again? Migration 5.0?
5.0 is referring to like the 5.0 versions of Active Record, because Rails 5.0, you don't have to think about it that much. Yeah. Create table, which one we're doing? Adoptions, right? Adoptions. What do we have in adoptions? Okay, we have some t.references. We can say owner ID. Let's start with integer.
Could you make one a reference as well, just to throw something?
Yeah, t.references pet ID. No. False. Right? We can't work without it. No. False. Timestamps. Any other pieces? We had t.date for adoption date, and t.integer for cost. Look good to everybody?
Do we need a reference for the owner ID?
I put that, oh, so let's see. So in our documentation, we don't remember how to do that. So then let's go here, and then we can go to Active Record Ruby guides. And then we can say, okay, show me information about migrations. So then we're like, oh, okay, this is how to create one. Create join. What is the thing that we're trying to deal with? Foreign keys, right? So we can do this. Add foreign keys to guarantee referential, blah, blah, blah. So add foreign key from articles. So it adds a new foreign key to the author ID column of the articles table. So add foreign key to the author ID column of the articles table. So this would be to the pet ID column of the adoptions table. I believe so. So we're doing this adoptions one, right? So this goes to this do end, this goes to the change end, and then this should be down here. add foreign key. Owner on the adoptions table. Right? We'll see if that works. Okay.
Well,
So
you have to reference a call.
So it's going to utilize the convention of, if we're saying a foreign key on something, that it should use the model's name underscore ID. So like a foreign key, right? Pet table, pet ID is the foreign key on another table, right?
So since now you have 3 tables, do we need to do rake for each table thing? Like the rake migrate thing?
Good question. So when we run migrate is going to look at the migrate folder. Rake is going to look at the migrate folder, check what time it is right now, and see, have there been any migrations that have been created since I last went and looked. So it's going to see 3, right? Because we just created them. And then it's going to do all 3 of those migrations in a row, in like chronological order.
So that's why the format file is important.
That's why the format file is important. Like the file name having a date is important. Eventually, you'll generate those by running a line in your terminal. So you won't have to remember, okay, it's 2017, then the month, then the day, then the hour, then the second. It'll do that for you. Rake and eventually Rails is going to have tasks that will help generate all this stuff for you, a lot of this stuff for you. But for now, you should know how it's built and why it's built, right? And do it a little bit manually. We're in like middle management. We're not at like super high management yet.
I mean, when you say they generate for you, it means like they generate like the time, like the file.
It'll generate the file with the timestamp.
Well, you just say wait, migrate, and then you have to put any file name in?
No. So before you do DB migrate, you will generate migration files with different scripts that'll help you do it for you. Okay? So for now, we've built those files by ourselves by actually creating the files manually and creating all the stuff in there manually, right? This stuff in here that you see, like pretty much you're going to be writing most of this stuff out yourself most of the time. But the generating of the file, like touch new file with this file format name and all that, you'll be able to generate those. For now, we're just going to do what? Ask Rake to DB migrate. Ooh, it didn't like what we did. Ooh, let's read. Okay, so here's what happened. It was like, all right, Rake, all right, Carrell, here I'm gonna go do, okay? So first I'm gonna read this create pets. I'm migrating it. Say setting up this, creating this table with an integer, and then, all right, done and done. Now I'm gonna create owners. Done and done, done and done. I got owners, done and done, okay? And then it got down here to foreign key, adding a foreign key based on what we wrote in adoptions, right? So add and for a key owner adoptions, Rake aborted. It was like, wait, you don't have relation owner. So now we get into this like larger, this was a SQL statement that it tried to run. And then it was like, I can't do all that stuff. Okay, so this is when we get to like a point where like, oh, we messed up, and then it like doesn't let you go forward.
It won't drop tables.
We don't have to drop the tables necessarily. We can go back into here and we can see what we did on adoptions. And see, probably this was what we wrote that was wrong. So T integer owner ID, right? Because pet was fine. So I'm just going to put references. Owner ID. And just leave it be for now. Trying to run this Rake DB migrate again. Okay, cool. So now adoptions is fine. So it's like fine. Did all your stuff. Okay. So that last one I had a problem with. We fixed the problem, and then it was able to run the migration. So if I try and run again, just to display the fact, if I try and run DB migrate again, nothing. Why? Because it was successfully able to do the 3 migrations since the last time. There was nothing new that got created since that last time, so it had nothing to do. Okay, so where are we at? We did migrate.
We didn't do a migrate before, right? It wouldn't make sense.
It wouldn't make sense to. We did do it before, but it didn't show us anything because it didn't make any sense. It didn't have anything to migrate. So it was like I migrated a big nothing. Congratulations, you migrated nothing, right? So now we're at model. Okay, we have our 3 migrations. We know that we have 3 tables in the database that hold pets, pets, owners, and adoptions, right? But in our models folder, we have nothing. So we're going to create a new file in here called pet.rb. Okay, so in here, how do I do that? What does the model look like? Class. Pet. So pet singular, right? Class pet. End. Always end. Start end, right? And we are inheriting from active record base. Okay. Now I have a pet model. For now, that's enough. Okay. So I'm gonna copy that models pet.rb to owner rb. Same thing, app models owner rb. And same thing for, what was the other one? Adoptions. Adoption. Good thing I caught myself. Right? Pet.rb, owner rb, and adoption rb. That's just me making a file copy from one to the other so I don't have to do the whole touch new thing.
So you just created files.
Yeah, I just created files. So I have adoption now and owner, right? But obviously I made a copy of pet, so I need to change this to adoption and this to owner.
And this is what will let us add new records to it. So we can like owner, not new.
Exactly. What's one big thing that I've already messed up and I'm already at step 3? Step over here. What is one thing that I have not done, but I'm already at step 3?
Oh, did you see?
Nope, that's later. What did I not do? Nope, it wasn't that. Yo, I didn't even tell Git what's going on. Git has no idea.
Oh,
I didn't commit any of this. What if I ruined something? What if my computer crashed right now? Because it's like doing the most right now with my Rainbow Wheel of Death. What if the Rainbow Wheel of Death came for my laptop?
Okay.
Pet Shelter was erased.
All right.
Local on Git, what is machine crashing? It ruins everything anyway. It's all local.
That's true.
So you need to push it
I do also need to push it.
to survive.
Yes. Survive the Rainbow Wheel of Death. I would have to not only just set a Git commit, but I would also have to push it up to GitHub. Okay.
Can we speak sort of architecturally here?
Yes.
So we are doing, this is active record. What do we call what we're doing right now? Like,
Building a thing.
Programming.
I know, but like,
Like this is
Right now we're doing the model
database.
stuff. That's the stuff we're on. Like,
so what like?
It's like how you build a database
Okay,
in Ruby.
all right. So, but we're not doing it through.
we're not doing this pure SQL.
Yeah. So Git is the mechanism in our computer that like takes things from SQL or Active Record or like whatever and like stores it somewhere. Right?
Git's in the
It's like
corner
the
watching.
librarian.
Yeah,
It's like
Git's
the
in the
librarian,
corner
right?
watching. If you never ask, they're never gonna like write anything down.
Yeah.
And then if you ask them, oh my God, did you remember how the house looked before it burnt down? You never asked me to record it, so no.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So so it's the historian.
Yes.
Okay? So Git is the historian, and that does like everything that we do on our computer, like developing coding, like we're gonna use Git to save it and to like push it into different locations or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
When we tell it to, yes.
When we tell it to.
Yeah. Everything, the caveat to all of this stuff is when we tell it to.
But
Right.
I thought that when we commit something, that's like saving that version.
It's saving that version.
But if your computer crashes, what was this last thing?
So if I'm doing all of that and just committing it locally,
Yeah.
and my computer crashes, I have nowhere else that this was saved, like GitHub, for example, that I can pull that history down
Oh.
eventually
Really?
and do that. So if you're not doing this git commit, git push, then you're not saving anything elsewhere. You're just holding it onto your computer, and then if your computer blows up, it's too bad.
It's like when I save on a Word document, like as soon as I press save and registered, my computer would crash.
No, it would
What do you mean
not.
crash. You
Crash
crash
mine.
Like freaking reboot, blue screen of death. Like
Yeah,
not
that's a
going
rainbow
back.
wheel of death, and yeah,
Okay.
that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. Sorry. Different.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have done these steps, right? We're
But, like,
done
our-
with step 3.
I'm sorry.
No, go
Our
ahead.
computer freezes and we have to shut it down. That's different than blue screen of death.
Yeah, because at that point, your code editor has saved as much as you might have saved.
Yeah. Like
So
everything
your
we committed.
code editor has saved what your progress was. But if you can't, like if you messed up so much and you're trying to do like Control-Z, Control-Z, Control-Z to undo, it can only undo so many times.
Yeah.
And you can't go back to that time when you had it working. So that's why you always commit when you have something working, so you can mess it up and always go back.
Yeah.
Okay? So we've passed model. Now we're at validate now? Yes? Oh, okay. Yes, validate. That's the next step. Okay, so we already did some stuff in our database to say like things shouldn't be null, things shouldn't, things can and cannot be null, right? At the database level. Active Record lets you do some extra validations that will help you further make sure that your database doesn't get ruined by like people giving you shoddy information, right? Because it's going to happen all the time. So right now, what do we have in our current setup with our models? We have a few, so we can look at adoption. So I usually like to look at these side by side. So I really hate you. Just go away. I'm gonna look at my models on one side and my migration on the other side, because sometimes that's useful for me to inform me like what validations do I need to make sure I'm setting up, right? So let's not look at adoption first. That's a lot. Let's look at pet first. Okay, and then just for the sake of us having some extra information here. So we know we have created a table named pets. It has 3 things, and we want to make sure that we have some validations set. What are some validations that y'all can remember from yesterday that some of you might have worked on?
Validate.
So that's how it starts, right? Validates what? Validates a given column, right? And then it's like whatever kind of validation, valid type validation type. Okay, that's typically how it's written, right? So if we look at one of our columns like name, so what are we validating on name?
It's only character.
Well, at least we should make sure that presence is true, right? Because in our database, we also have making sure that it's not null, but we shouldn't make our database do that much work. Active record is here to help us out, right? Like before it even touches the database, we should be saying like, you know what? You're trying to give me an object that doesn't have a name, and I'm not okay with that. This pet should have a name, right? So we're validating that a pet should have a name here.
Where does that error, what would the error be? Like in our spec, when we were testing with part 2, you know, like it does the validation, but let's say you have a program or like a field on your web page that you're trying to enter something into. Is it like throwing an error and catching that error and then putting it back up onto the screen that X, this is not a valid?
Yeah, so like window to the future, that's basically what some of what Rails is going to let you do. Some of that is HTML doing some of the validation for you. But yeah, that validates is really going to allow you as a programmer to decide like what is okay and what is not okay in terms of each of my columns for data I will accept. So if we're unsure of like what we want to validate on, we can go to the Ruby guides and look.
Because we put the type of data, sorry, we specified the data type in the file.
We did. We specified the data type, right? And based on that data type, there might be some extra validations we can utilize, like numericality, for example. But for the most part, there are certain validations, no matter what data type, that will be utilized like not null, right? We just know that no matter what kind of data type I'm asking for, whether it's an integer, a string, or a blob, or a JSON or date object, I don't want that field to come at me null. That needs to be a filled up record column, right? So you can't give me a pet without a name. That's what I'm saying here. And then here I'm saying you can't give me a species without, you can't give me a pet without a species. Presence, true. Okay. Additionally, I can say validates age on like numericality. How would I do numericality? Has anybody used? Yes.
How you say like you want like the name as only character, like not the symbol? Sometimes like people put like symbol like question mark, whatever on the page. How can you say just a character like alphabet, like A to Z? You know, add a name like to be more specific, not just like random.
Oh, so like a name has to use letters. You can you can do, so that's where we go into like looking through what validations options do I have. And that's where these guides become useful. Eventually you get used to like, oh, I know I have presence. I know I have uniqueness. I know I have, like, that's a good point. Can I have 10 different, can I have like a dog named Fluffy and a cat named Fluffy and a bird named Fluffy? That's reasonable, right? Somebody might have a fluffy bird, okay? But can I have a date that, or can I have an email address that's the same email address for Kara, the owner, and Jessica, the owner, and Takesha, the owner? Should they all have the same email address or be allowed to have the same email address? That's up to us, right? And if I say that is not okay, then I will set that field to have uniqueness true on the validation. So maybe I'll set that up for owner, for example, right? Because I don't want people coming up at me saying like, oh, my name is Keisha with this email address, and then come back saying like, my name is Charles with the same email address. Like, Why are you lying at this point or something, right? But maybe people share the same email address, just like you share the same address. So you don't want that necessarily to be in a unique field. So then you would be okay with that, okay? So all this stuff is the larger part that comes from you building it, right? It's your decision to make these choices on validating your data and keeping your data either like clean or like acceptable or accessible to others. Does that make sense to everybody right now? Does it have some clarity? Okay, so here are the different kinds of validations we can utilize. Like we can exclude certain things, have a certain format. Things have to be included like in a certain list. It has a certain length. It has to have a certain length. It has to have a certain like number set. It has to be present, or there has to be an absence of certain things. It has to be uniqueness, or you can utilize extra custom things by building like validates with this certain function. And then I could build a method that says like when it goes through this process, and if it goes true, then I can move forward. If not, then this is not valid. Okay? These are all the different kinds of validations you can use.
What about like, can you use this one apply like we give like a password that you try to get like a password?
Yeah, so you will get into password stuff later, but yes, you will utilize some information that has to do with like it validates password. Okay, there are active record ways to do validating passwords and things like that. Okay, so for now, let's just leave it at present's true. Okay, so just to reflect what we're doing here, we can have a name and a species are going to be multiple. That's fine. Age. Oh, I was going to use numericality. For now, let's just leave it blank. Okay, but that will be something I want to fix in the future. Fix numericality, right? I don't want to have a -43 aged pet, or a 150, or no, there are animals that are 150. But do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's some information that I don't want, like a 1,000-year-old dog. That's not going to exist. So I don't want that fake information in my database. We want to keep integrity, keep our integrity of our database on point. Okay. So I did this pet one. And so on and so forth with save it, models. Quickly with owner, what do you think? Validates, name, presence, yeah, true. That's basically what we had with owner, right? And then email is fine. And then adoption, we're gonna leave that be. Oh no, except we want to make sure that it validates owner, ID, presence, true. And then pet ID.
I mean, if they're already referenced, can they be null values?
Not usually, but we want to make sure that they are there. It's useful to just have it. Okay, so this is a good question. Okay, so we went through validation. Success to us.
The inheritance with the lowercase base, B for base, cause an issue?
Ooh, is this supposed to be a capital B?
I think so, right?
I don't remember.
That's why we need TDD, right?
Yep. Good eye. Base with a capital. It might have given me an error. You'd probably be like, I don't know what that is. Active record is not listening to us. Okay. All right. So we went through validations. And again, note, it doesn't 100% protect the database because, as we know, we can, somebody could get all up in the database and change something directly, and our validations won't matter. But we want to make sure that we are having multiple levels of protection for our database's integrity, not just at the database level. Because if you get there, at that point, you can just blow your database up. Okay? Now, the next step is associate. So this is us creating associations on our in our models for our database for Active Record to interact.
Just creating the interaction.
Yeah. So all the arrows we kept pointing, pointing things to. Okay, this is where the has many belongs to, has one, has many through. That's where all that nomenclature comes into play. And that's where we're going to write it in our model files. Okay, and note when you write it on one side, you should make sure that you, like, whatever other corresponding relationship from the other side is also written on the other model, right? So, and we have our pet, our adoption, and our owner, right? So, now that we have our validations, what are our relationships with a pet? So a pet has many adoptions, right? And a pet has many, well, pet has one owner, really. Does a pet have many adoptions, or does a pet have one adoption? Ooh, good question.
So for that adoption store, you've got one pet.
Yeah, but a pet.
Unlike that store. That store, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. We're modeling a pet store or whatever it's called.
Yeah. This is a good question. For now, we'll just put pet, because what I want to get to is a pet has an owner, right? And a owner can have multiple pets, right, through adoptions. So maybe a pet belongs to owner through adoptions. How does that sound? Makes sense.
What does that actually do, in effect?
It will allow us, you'll see eventually it'll allow us to ask for things in a particular way. It'll create connections in a very particular way that we are able to utilize in Active Record. So if we look at the Active Record instead of the validations, we want to look at the associations. This will tell us these are the different ways. Has one through, maybe we do that. Has one through account, right? Has one owner through adoption.
The pet could have multiple owner IDs too.
Potentially, but for now, what if we try this? Oh no, none of that. Belongs to owner through has. Did it say has one? Has one owner through adoptions. So then I can ask, hey pet, who's your owner? Pet has one owner. Pet has one owner through adoptions. But then in order to do that, it has to have a connection. Belongs to supplier, has one. These are all the different ways that you can utilize has one through.
Essentially like a join, right?
Yeah. This is very much more difficult than I thought. Okay, so we have an owner has many adoptions. A given owner has many adoptions. Has many adoptions. An owner can make many adoptions, and an owner can have many pets. right? So I can adopt Puppy and Fluffy and Spot, my cat, okay, and has many pets through adoptions. So we can either see that information here, has many through, okay, for how to write that out. And whenever I utilize that information in my model, I'll have access to a certain set of methods like this. So I can say owner.pets, and it'll give me the collection of all the pets, right? Or I can say pet.owner, and it'll give me the owner of that pet, okay? Or I can say adoption dot, I can ask for things a particular way based on the associations that I set in my model, okay? Has many adoptions, has many pets. So then an adoption has many pets, has many, oh, belongs to, sorry. So an adoption belongs to pet, and it belongs, like it's a contract between a pet and an owner, right? So it belongs to both a pet and an owner, right? So an adoption is a contract between a pet and an owner.
That prevent you from doing like adoptions.owner.
Well, you should be able to ask adoption for, like, given an adoption record, who is the owner on that adoption? Who is the pet on that adoption? So you should be able to say, like, and then that will look at the foreign key ID for pet and for owner and give you that information of, like, who that particular pet record is, or who that particular owner record is.
When they look like the whole record.
Say it again?
When they look on that, like, how they look on the table, like, they look like the whole.
How it looks on the table is one ID number that's referring to like the foreign key number that is referring to the other table.
So they can read like everything that refers to that ID.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
they store in as an array.
The active record has, like, collection objects that you would utilize, but they get returned based on what method you utilize. They get returned in certain ways. So we went through associate, right? We had has many through, belongs to on each of our things, right? We have has many adoptions. Oh, pet has many adoptions. We'll leave that for now. Has many adoptions. Okay. So that's the step we take for associate. So we're at step 5. Seed is the next one. Okay, seed the database. All right, so we're gonna build a seed file, and then we would run that seeds file. Okay. Sometimes I like to just go in and test, like, is this gonna work the way I expect it to before I do a seed file, just so that I know that it's gonna work the way I want. So you can definitely do that as well.
Test without data? Or just like run the
Yeah, you can. So, like, for me right now, I can double check that all these methods are working the way I want by going to Rake and asking for the console. Ooh, you need to supply at least one validation for pet. Let's see what the error is. Oh, So we validated, we said we're going to validate age, but we gave it no validation information. So it was like, what do you want me to validate on? I'll wait. And then it just sat there. Okay? So we don't want to validate age. We'll just leave it for now. We can go back and be like, thanks, Rake. I appreciate your candor. That'll give me the console. So console is like, hey, Rake, set up a meeting with the database at the conference table. Okay? And then database comes to the conference table, and IRB being that conference table. And then you can talk active record to Rake or to active record. You can speak active record to active record, and active record is going to talk to the database and give you back the information you want. So it's kind of like a moderated conversation with the database through active record. Okay, so now I can say pet.all. Okay, I have no pets. Pet.new. So I'm going to make Fluffy. Right? You all remember pet.new, right? So .new is going to allow us to create an active record object from that model that we're calling on pet, right? So everything's nil. So I'm going to ask, is this an actual object yet? Yes or no? What do you think?
Yes.
What do y'all think? Is it valid? Is it an object yet? No, it is not yet. Why? You can tell immediately right here, pet has an ID of nil. Should we have a nil ID? Probably not.
But it still defines Fluffy, it's obviously in the namespace.
Right. So Fluffy is kind of like in the it's not made yet, but it'll let you set up the time that you need to make the thing that you want to make.
I thought the auto-generated ID, the default auto-generated ID would have supplied that.
It will when it's an actually created object. But right now, we've just made basically we made a container that we need to fill all the information in first. Only then will it be a real valid object, and only then will it be committed to the database. That's how useful active record is. It's like, don't give me fake stuff to throw into the database unless you know it's a legit set of information.
So right now we're just testing the functionality of the files.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say I want Fluffy to actually have, in here, so active record also gives us all this information, like it all automatically creates the adder accessor kind of stuff, right? So I can ask fluffy.name, right now it's nil, I can set it to Fluffy. Okay, so now if I ask for Fluffy, okay, so I changed that from nil to being Fluffy. And I can ask, is that your name? Yes, that's my name. Okay, so we set validations on this, right? So if I save Fluffy right now, it blows up, right? Why does it blow up? Validation failed. Species can't be blank. Did we write that specifically in our model? We wrote that species cannot be null, right? We wrote presence true, right? So because of that, active record knows that if you're trying to do something where there's a validation on it, it knows what to tell you, that this field can't be blank. So please fill something in. Okay, so now I can say fluffy.species equals puppy. Oh, I'll say dog. Oh, okay, cat.
Oh no, I don't care.
Now fluffy.save true. Okay. Oh, I wish it was more verbose. I gotta figure out why it's not verbose. So now if I ask for pet.all, I have one record in my model table. It would take forever. Thank you for pointing that out, right? Like if I wanted to have a bunch of records to play with and get some pets adopted, right? I would have to create every single person and make sure that all the data is validated. And it's really, really, really annoying and way too much waste of my time, right? I'd rather create a seed that says 50 times do create a person with a random name and a random email address, and 50 times do create a pet that has a random species and a random name, and put them all in my database, right? It's way easier. One time, boop, done. Okay, so that's the point of seeding a database, for you to be able to just throw all that stuff in there, and then you can get to the cool stuff of figuring out how do these things talk to each other or interact with each other or do the things that I want them to do. Okay?
Do you have like a Rake GUI?
Not really. Not really. It's usually done through the console. And later on in Rails, you'll have more interactivity when it comes to like what you build with views. But for now, no. Besides the console, that's all you got. Okay? So now we know we can do this kind of stuff, and technically we've already created one thing in our database, in our pets table. So now we know we can do that. Real quick, I'm gonna make an owner. What do we need to create an owner? Name can't be blank. Okay, so Kara equals owner.create name Kara. Is there anything else that we need? No. Cool. So I have Kara and I have Fluffy. Now I want to make an adoption. Adoption dot create. Fluffy is the pet and Kara is the. It should just be able to do it. Fluffy Kara. Okay, so let's look at adoption.new and see what it does. Okay, so this is the information I need. Okay, so ID is nil. I need an owner ID. Uh-oh. Owner ID ID. Pet ID ID. Okay. Adoption date. Cost is nil. Come on, y'all were supposed to be my pairs. What happened? What happened here? And then we have created and updated that. Okay, so now we see our database is a little jacked, just a little bit, right? So we need to fix some stuff. Now, in order to do that, this is a really good point that we'll get to where we get to oops, right? I messed up my database. So for now, we'll just deal with what we have. Okay. Owner ID ID 1. Pet just for right now. Pet ID 1. So that's like Fluffy and Kara, right? They're both 1 for right now. And then adoption
You done Kara.id.
date. Yes. Good point. Adoption date. Dates dot. Time dot now. Should be able to say time dot now. I believe. Could I not? Undefined method owner ID for adoption. Did you mean owner ID ID? Oh, I did that. Owner ID ID. Pet ID ID. So we did some things wrong with our migration. So we'd have to go back and fix our migration, right?
Why does it need the owner ID string inside the?
Good question.
So just have a number.
So what it's saying.
I mean, when you did an owner create, why did you put that in there? Why don't you just put a number?
Here?
Yeah.
So when I did adoption create and I gave it the actual name, owner ID ID1 and pet ID ID1,
I mean, it doesn't. I don't think it likes. Does it? If you just put 1 and 1 in there instead of having.
I do have 1 and 1.
But do you need the? I mean, do you need to specify? But does the like does the argument order? Does argument order imply or not? You know what I mean? Like there's
No.
obviously when you do adoption.new, it shows you like an order of arguments, ID, owner ID.
No, because this, again, when we do this kind of notation, it's almost like hash notation, right? The order doesn't matter. It's saying for this key, use this value. For this key, use this value. So we don't need to have any kind of particular argument order that we're putting stuff in. We're just saying like for this particular thing, put this value. Okay, so there's obviously some things we'd need to fix. So we know that we probably don't want to do a seed because then it'll just blow up while we're trying to do the seeds, right? But for the purposes of this process, and I only committed once. I didn't commit before I did the migration, so I have to like go roll back on one of my group migrations and like redo the file and stuff like that. So for the purposes of us getting through this like steps, we're gonna make a seed file, but we're not gonna run the seed file, okay?
Oh, man, that's like all the.
That's why committing and getting stuff done in a good order is like useful to make sure that you have all the stuff set up. But okay, so if we wanted to build a seed file, we can say, right, like 20 times do, not down to, pet.new or pet.create, right? We want to use the faker gem, right? How have any of you used the faker gem before? No. Okay, cool. So if we never used the faker gem before, we just quickly look at the documentation. Faker gem. We can also definitely look at the way it was utilized in the previous project. Okay, so yeah, it's a weird name for things, but Faker Gem is basically a library of like all kinds of just randomness that you can use to call a method, and it'll just randomly generate any given number of whatever it is you're trying to get when it comes to like company names or like all the products you played with in the thing was all generated by Faker, right? So it has like a huge list. Again, these are all namespaced, modular namespace, right? So we have a Faker address, Faker ancient, Faker app, Faker avatar, all this stuff. We can use any of these things. Faker cat. So we have pets. Are these like cat names? Yeah, shadow, breed, registry. Okay, so I can make like a bunch of cats with a bunch of different cat name. I'm totally gonna use cat name. Okay, so all I have to do in here is require Faker and then pet create, right? Where name equals Faker cat name. Okay. And then I'm just gonna do this just for the purposes of being able to see, right? A name and a species.
We need the estimation tool.
Create exclamation means that it needs to like break. Create is like, it means bang, right? Create bang. So create bang and regular create are different because if you do create without the bang, it won't give you the raise error and break your stuff. It will just give you it'll collect the errors. And then you can determine whether or not the object was valid or not, and then save it. Whereas if you did bang, it will just it'll raise the error and abort your process. Yeah, those are functions in active record. Oh no, I turned off my thing. Okay. Okay, so we have species. We probably have a faker animal thing in here. Was there one for animals? This is cat, color, compass, date, dessert, hipsters, faker hipster. Oh, that could be like this species name.
So with the mistake, with the mistake that we made, can we just go back and change the code that we had in the model? Wouldn't it just be easier to do that?
Good question. So we could go back, and if we went back and changed the migration file, remember when we did the migration and then we tried to do it again and it did nothing? Those files were still there, right? If we edit that file and save it, did we change the file name? No, right? So it's going by the timestamp that file's named by. Okay, so if even though we might change the file, it's gonna look at it by the timestamp, and it'll say, I already did that migration, so I don't need to do it again. So typically when you get through migrations and you want to make another change to the database, you create a new migration and you do the whole change thing. For the purposes of us like learning and trying, we're going to roll back our migrations and then change our file and then do it again. Just because for us, like, it's good to learn, like, we can roll back our migrations to nothing and then have it remigrate with the information we changed in the file.
When you say roll back, this means you just create a different time frame.
No, it literally goes to the database and erases the table as if it didn't exist anymore. And then we go again and then do the new one.
You get authorities.
Okay, that'll be the species of our animal. Okay, and then age, we'll just do like rand, like 0 to 50. I don't know. Okay. Oh, it's not an S. Okay, so this will when you do Rake DB seed, it's gonna find the seeds file and run the seeds file. Okay, and then that seeds file is like whatever happens is it's gonna put that stuff in the database at the table that it needs to, based on, it knows you're trying to create pet, so it's gonna put those records in the pet table. Okay. So then you would also do like owner.create, and then like name is blah, blah, blah. Okay, and so on and so forth, because I want to make sure that we're already too far in our time. Okay, so after you create the seeds file, then you run Rake DB seed, that runs the seed file. Okay, we just talked about that. And then I showed you a little bit about query. You can go to the database from there, ask pet.all, get all the records. It'll show you that your seeds are there. You can start saying like pet.first, pet.last, pet.owner or adoptions.all. Create an adoption, okay? Again, you can do that all from Rake console. Oops, okay? So you should do that after you've created your seeds. Or like this one's kind of interchangeable. Like you can query and just double check that everything works the way you expect it, and then create a seed. And then you can go in there and do like larger queries, or vice versa, right? because you don't want to build a seed that you don't know is going to work or not the way you expect it to. Okay, and again, we're at step 7. We should have committed at least 7 times by now, right? So, oops, as you noticed, when you mess up, okay, here are a few strategies to utilize. Okay, 1, are you asking for the right thing? This is particularly useful when it comes to the query stuff, right? Like, do you actually know what you're trying to ask for? Just spend some time thinking about that. What are you trying to get at the end? What is the result you're trying to get? Can you go back a commit, right? So if I would have committed before I did all those migrations, I could have gone back to that commit before I did all those migrations and then double check that like none of that stuff was there. When you go back on a commit, a migration is not really, like your database is not a part of your commits. That's actually one good point to keep in mind, right? Your database is sitting over here, and the work that you're doing on your database or in Active Record, all the files you're using in your repository, like they're connected, but they're also a little bit separate. So if you do go back on a commit, you'll want to make sure that you do like a DB migrate or a DB drop and then DB create, just to make sure that you're dealing with like a clean set of stuff. All the things that you've built in your file in terms of your migrations and making sure that you see the schema that got generated when you did your migrations, it should all be set up in your file so that you can see, like you can at least see what the current structure of your database looks like. So I could have gone here and looked at our schema. This is what was created. So I could have, before we went into the, that might be a good point, to see what got created. So here I could see immediately that after my migration that I messed up, right? So we have owner ID, ID, pet ID, ID, right? And then it created these indexes, which is great.
Yeah, I don't remember how that.
Because when we did references, you utilize the table name instead, or the field that you're trying to use, or the table name, right? So instead of me saying references owner ID, I would say references owner. And then Active Record is smart enough to know that that means that I need to create an owner ID field on this table, and then it should refer to the owner table elsewhere. And that I should create an index. So if I need to go in between these two tables, I should create an easy and quick reference to indexing those two things talking to each other. Yeah, so this is the reflection of the 3 migrations we made, right? So if we look at the adoptions table, or the adoptions creation file, thank you. It was the last one we made. Yeah, we made a Doshin, first of all. And open up our schema. Yeah, so like our adoptions schema like ended up getting generated this way. So we know that we should have changed adoptions there, adoption date, and then t.references owner. Okay, that would have changed those 2 things. So t.references the other table. That's what generates the underscore ID and then creates an index.
That was under step.
When we're doing migrate.
But if they create a pet underscore ID like lowercase, but if you define like the capital like pet ID like the uppercase, it's gonna, it's gonna impact on.
Yeah, this stuff is all going to be done lowercase, and it'll know that there's a pet object that I should make an underscore ID for and key for. So it's going to do a lot of that work for you again. So you can do t.references, or you can do t.integer owner underscore ID. Okay, references is doing a lot more work for you.
Yeah, but I mean, for this owner, right? So if you go to table the owner, and then then if you create like the owner ID,
You wouldn't have an owner ID on the owner table. You have an ID. So remember, we didn't set that up explicitly. It just does it for us. Okay.
I mean, what if like you have the actual database? Like, it's like actual database. You cannot like I mean, when you commit a tweet, right? So how you be able to back up or like commit the actual database? If you work in a real like database. I mean the database with the real information in it, like because you cannot drop table and like.
Yeah, you can't drop table, so you would create a new migration. So a newer migration would be like change, instead of it saying like create adoptions, it would be like change adoption date column. And then you would do a change column method. There's a change column method. So instead of saying create table, it would say change column on this table, this column, and then you would say what the column should change to. All that stuff is stuff that you will find inside of Active Record in the migration section. So here where it says Active Record Migrations, it'll explain to you all the stuff that you can do. Create a table, creating a join table, change the columns, setting foreign keys when something happens, having reversible setup, if you need to roll back, what to do, if you need to reset the database, all that stuff. How to deal with the schema in terms of like how that works with Active Record and all that. Okay?
How you run the CDB, like the
Rake DB seed. Okay? So I've like run over your entire morning, but I feel like you all have a lot of new information to utilize. So hopefully that was clarifying and not like mind crushing. So that the next two challenges you have in terms of migration and validations, no, you have validations and associations. So those two challenges I should easily see you complete by the end of today. Friday, we're going to have an assessment, and I would spend some time going back just looking at like, okay, how would I do this in SQL? Maybe doing the SQL tutor process just to like remember those. And then Friday afternoon, we're going to have a group challenge. So y'all be put in groups again, and that'll be your work for the afternoon.
Will that be like a weekend project too, or just
somewhat weekendy? Like do enough that it should be done-esque. Okay, like spend some time over the weekend, but it's not going to be like heavy Sudoku weekend project. Yeah, but
cool.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that we could possibly have over the weekend, right?
I don't think so. Well, we'll double check. I don't think you have like massive homework outside of that. But okay, cool. So was that everything? Oops. Rollback migrations. Yeah, that's it. I'll just leave it at oops. Okay.
Oh, is that available as well? Is
the slide deck?
Yeah.
I'll share it with y'all right now. And I'll make it a PDF. Success.